We went an entire month spending basically nothing, and here's how it went. Hey everyone, it's Aubrey, recovering perfectionist, queen of distraction, and basically, long story short, we had too much fun over the summer, and as we were cruising through August and September was approaching, it was really obvious that we needed to slow down our spending, catch up, and that is how No Spend September came to be. So for us, a No Spend September was looking like us finally using the stuff that's in our freezer, the stuff that we ignore in the pantry, passing on random impulse purchases, and just being a little bit more thrifty and resourceful than we have in the past. So let's sit back, get cozy, and we'll chat about the ups and downs, the food, the free fun that we had, how much money we saved, and also who caved. So when it came down to us actually following through with an entire month of no spending, obviously there were going to be a lot of things that we needed to take into consideration on top of saving money. A big perk of this challenge for us was basically forcing ourselves to finally eat a lot of the food that we have been avoiding for whatever reason. For me personally, I have a very hard time planning ahead with frozen things. And with me being the primary chef of the house, that really was a big mindset shift for me. But I think that having a challenge like this where I couldn't just go to the grocery store and stock up on things that were just going to be ready for me in the fridge, it really gave me like a swift kick in the pants to actually utilize and plan ahead and deal with things that we had in our freezer. We did allot ourselves a $50 food budget for anything to fill necessary gaps. And I feel like I should use the word necessary very loosely because within like the first 3 days of this challenge, my husband went to the store and spent $17 on orange juice and bacon. But if $50 seems really low to you, keep in mind, we've got 12 laying hens, a garden that in September was really in its prime, and really more blackberry bushes than we know what to do with. But this no spend challenge also obviously meant no eating out, no ordering food, and we even decided to skip this year, which I thought was going to end up being a big deal. But my son, who is 8, and I remember at 8, like I was very aware that the fair was happening, and he completely forgot about it. And so, I was so worried about having that conversation, but it never ended up happening, thankfully. We did still keep our once a week trips that we take on Wednesdays after school. We go down to the gas station. We let the boys pick out a treat, especially with it being the beginning of the school year. That wasn't something that we wanted to take away from them. And even though during the summer our spending got a little bit out of hand, Josh and I generally aspire to be responsible adults. And part of doing this challenge was continuing that trend of being responsible adults, like paying our bills, our mortgage, our car insurance, our cell phone bill, utilities, etc. Those are obviously non-negotiables. This also roped in medical expenses, so there was a medical bill that I needed to pay for myself. And then when Josh snapped his back being too fun of a dad at the bus stop one day, it was not the end of the world when we took him to the chiropractor. It didn't feel like we were losing sight of our goal by prioritizing his well-being. And I will say that not spending any money for an entire month, I thought it was going to be really extremely hard for us. But overall, I feel like, at least for myself personally, it ended up being pretty easy for me. And I think a lot of that might have had to do with me, publicly declaring my intentions to the internet in the video that I had posted at the end of August before we started this. And obviously, I'm not only happy with the money that we saved, but I am also just so thrilled with the mindset shift that I feel like I have in myself and just what I've learned. And I can't wait to tell you all about it. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're just gonna tackle this week by week and then talk about some other things at the end. Alrighty, just kidding, scratch whatever it was that I just said. I had imagined talking about everything like week by week, but it was honestly just absolute torture for me to edit. It felt really random and all over the place. So instead of going week by week, I instead came up with categories on how we are going to chat about our experience having a no spend month. And those 4 categories that we are going to be talking about is food, which is a big one, fun, opportunities for creativity, and then the temptations and where things kind of went south. So first, we're just gonna jump in with food because I feel like the food aspect of things was definitely, I don't wanna say the thing that I was the most concerned about. It was a big deal to have the mindset of I'm not going to the grocery store this month, or having that $50 buffer just in case. And even though I do try to be really creative when it comes to cooking, I don't really always like going by recipes. I like using recipes for inspiration and then trying to use alternative ingredients if I don't have something, because I will at all costs avoid going to the grocery store for just one random thing. I just don't believe in that. And right off the bat, one of the first recipes that I found that I wanted to try to use up some frozen chicken thighs we had, I was able to use like a crap ton of kale. It called for like 10 cups of kale, which thankfully I had a crap ton of kale in the garden, but it called for a few different spices that I didn't end up having. So it gave me the opportunity to finally utilize some garam masala that I had gotten like a couple years ago for one recipe and just had never really used, but it ended up working like as a backup paprika, and I've actually really come to love it and have used it several times now in a bunch of different recipes. And then on top of the spices, that recipe called for mashed potatoes, and I thought that I had gone into this challenge pretty prepared, but apparently I only had 2 potatoes, and I did not want to use my only 2 potatoes at the beginning of the month to make mashed potatoes. So in the freezer, I found some old frozen hash browns, some old frozen butternut squash, and ended up making like a makeshift mashed potato with that. And it was pretty good. So I'm gonna link that recipe in the description below, and then I'll like add the changes that I made to it. And it was pretty delicious. So it was situations like that, just having the opportunity to be thrifty and resourceful. Like there was a frozen bag of hamburger buns in the freezer, and by the time that I had thawed them out, there was like half was soggy, half was hard. So I just dried them out in the oven, and I pulverized those into breadcrumbs, which we had used at some point down the road. And then we were having some friends over for a little camp out, and I thought we did not have any marshmallows, so I made marshmallows. And they are so good. Also gonna link that recipe. We picked a ton of blackberries. Thankfully, we have more blackberry bushes in our yard than we know what to do with. So the blackberries sustained my boys' fresh fruit addiction, which still somehow I managed finding like half-eaten bananas around the house. So over the course of the last couple months, I've been like saving the half-eaten bananas that I find and just putting them in the fridge. And I made some really good banana bread muffins with those. And there was really just honestly a lot of muffins that happened during this period of time, especially towards the end of the challenge when I kind of ran out of like the easy snack stuff. So a ton of frozen pumpkin was used for like chilies, and then some pumpkin muffins that I made as well, some frozen berries. My mom, she gave me a bunch of her green beans on top of the ton of green beans that we had gotten from our garden. So by the time like week 2 rolled around, you know, really just all of us were over having green beans. Currently, like anything that we harvest in the garden, the green beans are going in the freezer for later. Like even though we just cleared out a ton of stuff from our freezer, I'm adding more things to the freezer, but whatever. So back to my mom giving us things. She had me harvest all of her rhubarb from her garden, and that ended up being like 20 cups of rhubarb that I froze. I also had made a rhubarb crisp and then canned rhubarb jam, and it was like the most infuriating canning situation that I think I've had, other than when a jar cracks or something. The recipe that I doubled ended up only making 1 jar of jam. So it's kind of an annoying canning experience, but in the spirit of being resourceful and using what you have, that hot water gave me the opportunity to mop my floors. And so I mopped my floors. The day before, we ended up having like 2 back-to-back play dates, and 10 kids unmopped my floors. But back to the food, we got through a ton of frozen fish, some random cuts of meat. Like I ended up making a from scratch pot pie, and it was the most amazing like meat pot pie that I had ever had. But if you've ever cut up a chuck steak into bits, it is the most terrible experience. But I did end up getting some good bones for those. So if you cut bones out of meat, you save those bones and you make bone broth. I just had a bunch of like random carrots and like onion bits and bobs and some random celery from the freezer that I just threw in a pot. So I was able to make some broth, which helped with like the abundance of soup and chili that we ate over this period of time. And usually September, when we're getting some harvest from the garden, we're doing a lot of like minestrone style soups. So that would have been kind of like a normal thing for us this time of year. Just the fact that the garden wasn't like full swing this time of year really helped, you know, make this challenge a lot easier and helped us keep that grocery budget so low. Okay. What I need to check my handy dandy notebook. One moment. Let's see. Oh, let's see. I ran out of vitamin D, and you know, the fact that it's September, my son is back in school, so trying to stick to my goal, I really wanted to be prepared ahead of time. And since nobody was sick, I wasn't going to go out and buy any vitamin D or order any. I decided to use some dried elderberries that my husband had gotten me last year for Christmas, so I could make elderberry syrup. Finally got around to doing that. I also made a mullein tincture from mullein that's growing out in our yard, and thankfully nobody's gotten sick. We just took the elderberry syrup like as a preventative measure every morning. But my father-in-law, he actually ended up getting sick, or like almost getting sick, and so we gave him some of that elderberry syrup, and he said that by the next morning, like he felt totally fine. So that was like very exciting to hear. And I guess that, I don't know, does elderberry syrup fall in the food category? We're gonna say yes. Okay, let's see. Oh, my parents went out of town towards the beginning of the month, and they just live right across the street from me, so I was, you know, going back and forth letting the cat in and out and whatnot. And I took that opportunity, as, you know, the thrifty daughter that I am, to raid their fridge and just, you know, make sure that I am doing my due diligence and reducing waste. And I took anything that was about to go bad. So that's how we ended up with sour cream after we had ran out, and just some other like there were some apples and oranges that were looking a little sad that I took for some boys. So that, again, on top of the blackberries and our blueberry bush, helped sustain us a little bit further. And then their pear tree pantry actually produced pretty well, so they shared their pair harvest with us. And then I did also thaw out a whole turkey. We had two like 16-pound frozen turkeys in our freezer, so I thawed one of those out. And I think that by the time like I cut everything up and ground what meat I could cut off, I got about 3 pounds of ground turkey meat. I made 2 pounds of these turkey nuggets, which were so good. Also, mayonnaise, which I made a ton of mayonnaise over the course of this. Mayonnaise and barbecue sauce, like a super simple sauce combination that I did not expect to be so delicious. But 2 pounds of turkey nuggets. I had another pound that I used for like a hearty bean corn soup kind of situation that I also put more frozen pumpkin into. And then I did save all of the bones and just anything that was left over, and I filled up a huge pot and just simmered all of that with some water and some veggie scraps for about a day. And I think I ended up getting like 27 cups of stock. I feel like there was something else. So 2 things: the fact that we have 12 laying hens. Thank you, girls. Like having that protein for breakfast, especially in the end when we had ran out of bacon and any sausage, like the egg, our source of protein in the morning. And then also homemade bread. I made so much bread. I don't buy bread anymore, so that wasn't really a huge change for me, but just the bread and the eggs, those were like 2 staples that I think really made this a lot easier than it could have been. I couldn't imagine, not being able to buy bread because I like bread. So I think that that is everything for the food. Let's move on to the fun. So when it comes to the fun, I don't want to say thankfully my son Jackson was going back to school, but the fact that he was back at school obviously kept him busy for a significant portion of the day for the majority of the week. But we did end up having my husband, thank you Josh, he set up his big canvas hunting tent out in our yard, and we invited a few friends over and their kiddos over. So we had like a mom and kids sleepover and had marshmallows by the fire, and it was so much fun. I definitely want to do that again in the future. But I will say that scenario of having like all of these kids over at my house, and this was right at the beginning of us starting this No Spend September, it was like very I want to be generous and I want to feed the kids all the food, but then also at the same time, like in my mind, I'm in this weird limbo of like trying to be generous and feed the kids, but then also trying to be strategic and like resourceful and making sure that I don't give away too much. Like maybe I should have just given the kids like all of our frozen fish. Just kidding, that would have not gone over well. Okay, back to the fun. A lot of the things that we did, like having play dates and going to the library, were things that were already kind of normal for us. Since we weren't buying anything or having those outings to the store, I wanted to make sure that I was being mindful about doing things to get us out of the house and do something different than just sitting at home and not buying anything. We took a couple visits to our local petting zoo, which our membership was already paid for. I did pay $4 for each of the boys to have a bucket of veggies to feed the animals because we were with some friends and the friends were going to be feeding the animals, and we do that every time we go anyway. So that wasn't something that I wanted to take away from the boys. My husband, he did take the boys camping. They had a ton of fun doing that. But I think, in situations like this where you're not spending money, it's fun to, look outside the box and see what free events are in your area. There was a Touch a Truck event, like there was public utility vehicles, like there was a fire truck and a police car, and there was a bus and like forklifts, and there was even a tugboat and like a vacuum truck and a bunch of other different vehicles, and they had free snacks and stuff and a free reusable bag, which I was on board with. So doing different stuff like that we wouldn't normally be doing on a regular basis, and I'm glad we took advantage of that opportunity. And then my mom and dad did very generously treat us to a train ride, which we've been talking about doing for several months now. So we got to do that, and that was a ton of fun. Alec and Jackson absolutely loved that. I absolutely love that. So even though that was something that technically costed money, and my husband, he did buy Jackson a candy and himself a Red Bull at the concession. So shame on him, but I mean, what am I going to do? I guess that few dollars, isn't going to make or break us. But also, Josh, it was No Spend September, man. Alrighty, next we are moving on to the opportunities for creativity. And the opportunities for creativity, for the most part, I guess I had a lot of opportunities for creativity when it came to me doing things in the kitchen. But with, that aside, we're going to focus on the things that I did for Alec. I was starting mommy school with him, which is just, me and him doing an intentional activity together. I did really want to work on his colors with him. And for whatever reason, like in my mind, like I can't just, walk around my house and like point at that wagon and be like, oh, it's a red wagon, or oh, look, it's a brown chair. I was thinking like, oh, I need to buy like this activity for him or whatever. But I was like, you know what? I'm a crafty lady, I can make some stuff. So I just Googled, toddler color activities. And I found one idea where you take an egg carton and you paint colors on it and you stab a hole in it and you dye the ends of the Q-tip the color and then they match the thing. So I did that. We did primary colors, and then I had the brilliant idea of on the inside, I was gonna do secondary colors. And that one, since it was like the little pockets where the eggs go, I just went around the house and I found little toys or things that would fit in those spots that were the colors of the secondary colors. And he did the color matching, and now he's a color genius. So go me for using something that I already had and just using, an egg carton and Q-tips and paints that I already had. And then another thing that I saw was just taking, a white sheet of printer paper and just coloring the whole thing, just one color. And then again, just taking random things from your house and putting the sheets of paper on the floor, giving the kids the toys, and then they match the colors. That was another fun thing that he ended up enjoying. And then of course, like that made me feel good. Not only was I making this thing for him and not spending money, but he actually enjoyed and learned something from it. And then there were a couple crafts that we made, like we made pair of binoculars out of like a couple toilet paper tubes and did a tree craft. Jackson actually ended up doing that one as well. So we've got like some fall decor going. And just, it's like the cooking like I did. And I guess the activities that we did, it's like I was very much like the mom that I wanted to be in this month, and it made me feel really good. I think I really needed that, and I don't think it was necessarily something that I expected to happen. I don't think that I really expected to feel so much joy and pride around the things that I made or the things that I created, and like the decisions that I made and the opportunities that I provided to my kids. Just go me. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun and just so dang rewarding. Okay, moving on to the next thing, and that is the temptations and where things went south. Okay, so for me, my primary temptation was once the signs of fall were really starting to be apparent to me, I really felt this huge urge to buy a fall appropriate dress or skirt. And I didn't. I looked a lot. But it's just kind of funny how it ended up working out, because now here we are, like we're in October, I can buy something if I wanted to. And you know what I don't want to buy? I don't want to buy a fall appropriate skirt or dress, because I've been in like fall weather for a couple weeks now. And you know what I don't want to do in the morning? First of all, I don't even want to put on jeans. I only want to wear leggings, but I mean, I'm wearing jeans because I'm trying to be a fancy adult. And sometimes you wait and that temptation rides off, which leads us to the very first day of this challenge. Josh and Jackson walk in the house and Josh is like, we're gonna go to Ace to get XYZ for the zip line that we're making. And I'm like, ooh, I had to be the bad guy and like put the kibosh on that because it's no spend September. Thankfully, Josh had my back. And for the most part, like Jackson, he was disappointed, but he didn't make my life a living heck. So they didn't go to Ace, but I think it was like literally the next day or maybe even that afternoon, they ended up finding 8 of exactly what they needed to finish the zip line. And we've just been having zip line fun ever since. And it's just like, you never know what you might end up finding in your home or yard. But my husband, he did not find the RC parts he needed in our home. So he ordered RC parts for his broken RC. He did also buy a helmet mount for his GoPro for his helmet for a dirt bike race that he was doing. I don't know why he couldn't have just like duct taped it to his helmet like a regular person, but that's just me. And then he also bought an inner tube for his dirt bike because the inner tube popped, and apparently that's a necessity, but it's something that would have gotten purchased anyway. So like, I'm not freaking out about it. I'm also not freaking out about the riding lawnmower that he bought off of Facebook Marketplace, which it was like the biggest oopsie, and I don't even want to call it an oopsie. It was just kind of one of those situations. Like, it was a really great deal and opportunity that happened to fall during No Spend September. It was a riding lawnmower and a manual mower for only $200, and it's a nice riding lawnmower. And I mean, I can't even say that Josh is 100% guilty for this, because once he told me like it was $500, and once he told me that they had dropped the price down to $200, I was like, you need to go get this, because like I had mentioned, my mom and dad live across the street from us, and we have been bumming their lawnmower off of them for like the last 4 years since we moved into our house. So like, Josh will go over to their house, he'll hop on the riding mower and pull their push mower behind and drive it across the street. And it's just this constant like, oh, are you done with the lawnmower? Like, we always decide to mow our lawns around the same time. So now we don't have to worry about that anymore. Josh and I are official real adults now with our own lawnmower. So that was that. Okay, during this section of the video, I did forget to mention that Alex's rain boots ended up getting holes in the toes of them like the week before Josh took him and Jackson on that camping trip. And it was like, rain boots in the Pacific Northwest, they're a non-negotiable item. Like, we need our rain boots here, especially if they're going camping in September. So I asked a couple friends, like I did not want to buy any. So I asked a couple friends who had littles if they had a spare pair of rubber boots in his size, and nobody had any. But my mom had asked if there was anything Alec had needed recently. So I cashed in on her offer, and she ended up buying him a pair of rubber boots. So thank you, Mom and Dad. But if that offer wasn't there, it would have been one of those situations like, this is a non-negotiable item, he needs rubber boots, and we would have just spent it and considered it a necessity. But that's the rubber boot story. All right, so this is the part where I'm kind of losing my train of thought, so we're just gonna like wrap things up in this section, and we're gonna talk about, I guess, my feelings at the end. So at the end, like the last few days, I wanted to buy fresh fruit so bad. At this point, we really didn't have any fresh fruit in the house. It was like we had frozen stuff, and I was just, trying to make the healthiest muffins that I possibly could, just like using whole wheat flour and only sweetening things with onions. I said onions. Why did I say onions? Only sweetening things with honey. I need to go to bed. This is why I can't record things late at night. Okay. And then on top of that, just the satisfaction of like seeing, not bare shelves in our fridge, freezer, pantry, what have you, but just having like actually being able to see what was in our fridge and freezer and the pantry and the deep freezer that we had in the garage. I feel like I have a much clearer idea of the things that I actually have. And I think, being in the freezer on a more regular basis and actually like seeing the things that we had instead of just ignoring those areas of our food stash and whatnot, it was just all good and wonderful and fun. And I just highly recommend it. And this is the part where we move on to whatever else I'm talking about at this point in the video. So here we go into that portion where I talk about how this challenge really gave me the opportunity to really get back in the habit of recognizing companies' tactics to trick us into buying crap that sometimes we think we need. For whatever reason, we end up thinking that whatever item is going to fulfill this need that we think that we have or fulfill our kids' lives in some way. And as I really started to realize this and got further into the month, I really started to feel so much happier and really feel just a sense of pride in the things that we do already have. The things that we have aren't necessarily like the newest or the most stylish, but what we have is functional. And I do even think that my donation box and I got pretty close during this challenge. Like somehow not being able to buy things made me really aware of the things in my home that I probably shouldn't have bought in the first place. Like, did I have a few instances of buyer's remorse? And I don't know, maybe even not necessarily buyer's remorse, but maybe like the remorse of like, why have I hung on to this thing that I thought that I needed for so long? And I am so extremely thankful that I got back into that mindset now, especially as we're rolling into the holiday season. Also, we've got 2 back-to-back birthday months ahead of us for our 2 boys. And I'm just really having a new perspective on what I want to give, how much I want to give. Like we hear so often, and I feel like I've even said it myself and really started to realize as I've gotten older that less is more. And while doing this challenge, I really kind of started to dive into some research and some videos about how having more toys, which I knew in an aspect can hinder kids' play, but it's not even necessarily just the way they play. It's also like their developmental skills and their quality of play. And really all this, like that's a topic for another day, but I am going to link a video that kind of started me going down this rabbit hole. And I highly recommend it. It was really the start of a good positive mindset shift for me. Okay, so back to the actual topic of this video, but it is also kind of insights like that I learned over the course of this last month that I feel like are absolutely priceless. Or maybe it's like a life coupon. Like you'll save so much money over the course of your life because you came to these realizations about how easy it can be to overindulge and just mindlessly click order and bring these items into your home that temporarily fill some void. And the next thing you know, you're overwhelmed by all the crap that you have, half the stuff you don't use, whether that's clothing, toys, home decor, or all the frozen food that's in your freezer. I do think that the hardest thing though was not being able to add anything to my fall wardrobe. But in hindsight, it really doesn't matter. Like I'm happy and content for the most part with what I have. And I do think, there are a couple things that I might want to add, but it really just leaves me feeling like I want to be very 100% sure with the purchase of like anything that I want to bring in my home. Like how has not spending money made me want to spend even less money? Is this just like no spend the rest of my life? No, that's not a realistic thing, but I am just definitely at a point now where I feel so very content with what we have. And that is just a lovely feeling. Okay, so we've made it officially to the money part. So I'm going to leave out a lot of rambling and a lot of math that I did and pie charts that I looked at for far too long. And we will just talk about the estimated total of our savings for the entire month. And that number is $2,985. But saying almost $3,000 is quicker and easier to say. So for time's sake, we saved almost $3,000. And it is so mind-blowing that by cutting out frivolous or unnecessary purchases, and our monthly grocery eating out expenses, which I averaged out to be about $900 for groceries and about $400 for eating out. The $400 also factored in like coffee and my husband's random Red Bull purchases from the gas station. But just the food and the random things, like not buying those for a month, saved us almost $3,000. Now, most of this money will go towards the credit cards that were not paid off due to the summer festivities, but we are going to leave ourselves a little buffer in our checking account, just, in the spirit of being the responsible adults that we are. And I think that this No Spend September, this challenge is definitely something that I want to repeat in the future. Like maybe No Spend September is going to be a yearly tradition with, giving the opportunity to go to the fair maybe every other year, or doing a no spend month after the holidays. And, maybe our grocery budget is looking a little bit different because the hens aren't laying as much and, there's not as much fresh berries that we will have access to and the garden won't be producing at that time. So we'll see where this takes us. But I definitely, we will 100% be doing this in the future. And I guess just now speaking from experience, like having done an actual, for the most part, no spend month and having this experience, I really cannot recommend enough giving this a go. And initially going into it, I think that it can be intimidating and daunting, but there are so many no spend videos and blogs out there. And I think that a great way to get started is just watch a few of those videos, read a few of those blog posts, and then create your own set of guidelines to live by based on your lifestyle. That's kind of what I did. I'll try and find the blog post that I found in the video that I had watched that helped me get the ball rolling. One hesitation that I had was what if we need something from the store? And it had never crossed my mind that I could set myself a small grocery budget. But there was one blog that I had read that had mentioned just having a grocery budget. I was like, wow, what a mind-blowing concept. And I think by watching videos like that, it gives you an idea of how much you can customize challenges like these to work for yourself and your family. You might look at our $50 grocery budget and think that that's absolutely ridiculous. And if we didn't have chickens or a garden producing at this time of year, I would think that a $50 budget was absolutely ridiculous myself. But I just think that going into this, it's important to keep an open mindset, be creative, shop around for recipes that work with what you have, and then giving yourself the opportunity to get creative with ingredient alternatives that you already have instead of running down just to grab one thing at the grocery store. But rambling and stories aside, summed up, I 100% recommend doing this. Just give it a shot, see where it takes you, and remember that any deal you may find from a company, it's a trick. But if you find a great deal on a riding lawnmower on Facebook Marketplace, you use your own discretion on that one. Thank you for taking a chunk out of your day to listen to my tale. If you would like to join me for future videos, you are invited. I hope to see you in the next one. As always, I love you, have fun, and be kind.